that you've heard here, and some that you haven't heard. Try and understand that all truth, all things in life are perceived one of three ways. Most people see the outer, which is easy, which is comfortable, which is not challenging or threatening to our beliefs, our views, our values. Those of us that are initiated or chosen will see an inner reality. Then there are those few who see the hidden, the secret, the esoteric reality. And that is reality that is behind all that you may ever perceive or know. And it's a process of growth, it's a process of learning, it's a process of unlearning. It's a process of living and dying, because they are one reality, just perceived differently. My name is Ghat-Laetoli.
Wat is de naam?
Ghat-Laetoli de Baaba. The nation I come from is Maasai.
De natie waar hij vandaan komt is Maasai.
The message that comes
En de boodschap die komt
from the ancestor through me
van de voorvaders door hen
is one a little different.
is een klein beetje anders.
We talk of peace.
We praten over vrede.
We want peace.
En we willen vrede.
We ask for peace.
We vragen om vrede.
But the question is,
Maar de vraag is,
which form of peace?
wat voor soort vrede?
Every nation
En iedere natie
and every people
en alle mensen
ask for peace.
die vragen allemaal om vrede.
Yet each nation and each people
En alle mensen en alle naties
have their own particular idea of peace.
hebben hun eigen idee over wat vrede zou moeten zijn.
So a question I ask,
Dus wat is nu de vraag?
is it the peace that we want and need,
Is het de vrede die we willen en nodig hebben?
or is it the understanding that we need?
Of is het begrip wat we nodig hebben?
With the understanding, the peace
En met het begrip en over vrede,
is a natural consequence.
dat is een natuurlijk gevolg.
I propose that peace
En hij wil voorstellen dat vrede
becomes the result of understanding.
dat het resultaat mag zijn voor begrip.
So the quest of understanding should be first.
Eerst zouden we dus het begrip moeten hebben.
There are no accidents.
What do you mean there are no accidents?
Everything is for a reason.
Uh-huh.
And that reason is good as long as you allow it to be good.
And that, I think that's the reason that I wanted to see you. Just that you can look in my eyes, and I can look in your eyes.
Yeah, it's a positive thing, yes.
Okay, that's
It's
well,
positive,
that's,
you see, because you know, when we meet, you know, sometimes we have to understand and the difference in energy, the difference in thinking, and see the oneness. There's a the oneness.
Yeah.
There's a connection there.
Uh-huh.
When I talk to you, I'm talking to my brother, I'm talking to my son, and also my father. There's no difference.
What do you mean by that?
Because your body
Yeah.
and my body is only the vehicle in which we're traveling. The essence of our being is one.
But a lot of people think that their body and especially themselves are so important.
It is.
That's what we call ego.
It is. It is. But the problem is that they make it the absolute reality. They make it the primary point or the primary focus of their life. And they forget that this body is only an effect. This body is not the cause. You see? The effect is there because the cause is using the effect. So our essence is working through this body. Our essence is working through this mind, this heart, in order that the one mind, the one heart can be better known, can be better understood. And this is a cycle process. It's not automatic.
But that's quite interesting, because then it is not important how you dress, how you look, how you speak. It's important what you give another person. Is that true?
That's important, and the exterior becomes important because the exterior, in its basic nature, expresses the interior. What you are inside is reflected to your outside. How you feel in your sight, how you feel in your mind, how you feel in your inner being is expressed in your outer being. You will wear certain colors. You will like certain music. You will eat certain food because there's something inside of you creating that desire, creating that appreciation.
So that means that outside is also important.
It is.
What can I learn? Because your exterior is so eloquent. Is that a word? It's so significant. What does that say of your inside?
My understanding is the science, the mystery, the spirit of the outside. And that understanding has been something real for me because my ancestors gave it to me, gave it to my ancestors, and so I have retained that. I have been able to retain that by pursuing and understanding a deeper realization of that. So when I look at the outside, I see it a different way, because I see that it is a spiritual message. I see that it is a message of love. It is a message of unity. It is a message of harmony. You see? And so because of that, then the colors I wear and the artifacts that I wear are representing that. Because it is not me who is sitting here with you. It is the ancestral spirit working through me, living through me, speaking through me, to your ancestral spirit who lives and speaks through you.
But you have your own responsibility.
I have my own, but I don't own it.
What is real Baba in you? What do you see as only from yourself?
The real
real
Baba,
Baba,
the
yeah.
real Baba, the real Father is the essence that dwells in both of us.
It's not only then I think between us, but also between other people.
Exactly. And not only between other people, but between every physical reality that we can perceive.
Okay.
All sentient beings, as well as all matter, animate or inanimate. We believe in something called animism.
Yeah.
Most indigenous people, if not all, believe in the basic concepts of animism. Animism is the realization and understanding that all things, literally all things, live. Not only does it live, but it's intelligent. And because of its life and because of its intelligence, it is blood related. Be it the chair or the floor or the microphone or the clothing, because it is essentially made of the same substance. And that substance, from a physical perspective, is the atom.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
But first is the cell. The cell is broke down to the molecule. The molecule is broke down to the atom. The atom is broke down to its components, which is circumambulating the nucleus at 186,000 miles per second, the speed of light.
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
squared, okay?
Yeah.
Which gives us physical reality. This is Einstein's theory telling us this, okay?
But that's scientific. But more back to where we are now. Are there things when you walk on the street, sitting in a car, sitting in a plane, that makes you angry, that irritates you? Because I consider these things very human.
This is
Anger and happiness but
This is true, but there's a way that we can learn to deal with that, and that is to see, not to be controlled by, not to be ruled by, but to simply observe, to accept, to acknowledge the relative reality of our anger, our fear, our like, our dislike, our being, our not being, our doing, our not doing, etc., etc. But to not be so inundated by it until we are completely absorbed by it and ruled by it and controlled by it, because it is a passing thing.
But that means that you have to accept it.
You have to accept it and embrace it.
But you don't. I don't know you so well. In another way, I don't know you at all. I only see you now. But you don't give me the feeling that. You give me the feeling that you are someone who is fighting for things. But the way you explain it to me, it looks then, if you see something on the street, people rob each other. Do you accept it? Are you standing with your hands on your backside, or?
It depends on the motive, the purpose, and the reason for which that has happened.
But you don't know that in a minute.
You don't know it, but you can feel it. And this is where your intellect has to give way to your intuition, and this is what's called in some Eastern religions or philosophies a state of enlightenment. When you see something, you see it with your whole being.
Yeah.
And your whole being being in touch with the existence of that happening. Your whole being at one moment being in touch with the whole reality behind what you are experiencing or what you are seeing. Then you get an intuitive feeling for what is going on. And that intuitive feeling motivates you to action or to not action.
Yeah. And in what stage of enlightenment is Baba?
This is all a part of what Baaba means. Baaba means father.
But do you
Spiritual father.
spiritual father?
Ah.
But is it strange when I ask you? Do you know the word, and do you know what feeling is being in love, being angry, being sad? Do you know what?
Of course. These are very real. But the reality is relative, because from one moment to the next it's changing.
That means that you are not a person who lives in extremities. You are. Am I
live
right?
in it, but I live in it, but I don't live because of it. I'm just like you. I enjoy, and some things I like, some things I don't like, some things I want, some things I don't want.
What do you don't like? And then I'm not talking then about wars, but small things. What do you don't? What you don't like?
I don't like anything that I feel or sense to cause a feeling or a sense of disharmony in myself or in another human being or in any form of life. I don't like that. But that doesn't mean that because I don't like it that I'm necessarily going to do something to change it. Unless the change is necessary.
Yeah.
You see? And what determines the necessity of the change is when I can look at it selflessly.
Selflessly.
When I can look at it selflessly and not judge, but be clear enough to discern, then that discernment, that stipulates my action.
But the world you live now in Los Angeles. I just came from there. Last year I was in India. These two worlds are so opposite to each other, isn't it? How do you live in your head with these both extreme worlds? Because being in India is so different than being in Los Angeles.
You must be able to live from within.
Yeah.
You must be able to live within. When the sun shines, does the sun not shine regardless to what is happening, where it shines? The sun is still shining.
Yeah, that's true. Behind the clouds.
The sun is still shining. So we have to be like that.
But sometimes, let me speak for myself. Sometimes I cannot accept that.
It's difficult. It's difficult. And it's okay that it's difficult. Because the obstacle, in reality, presents the opportunity.
Another thing. It's a big word, but we know what war is. We see it on CNN. We see it on the NOS journal. Do we have to accept wars, or do we have to fight? Do we have to fight against it? And I don't mean fight with bombs, but do we have to fight it?
I feel that we have to understand it. And in understanding the nature of anything, the true understanding will motivate your action, and that action will be proper according to what is needed, not according to what is desired. War for the sake of war is something that should be changed or altered or should not happen. However, war is not in and of itself the cause. Greed, lust, ignorance, jealousy, anger based upon egotism. This is the cause of war. War is only the culmination of many years of these problems. You see, so if a person or persons or nation or continent or whatever it may be does not willfully and intentionally choose to change their egotistical attachments and their egotistical ways of seeing another person or seeing life, then in the process of their refusal, they are setting the stage for the conflict.
That's so hard to accept for me, because 2 years ago I was in Goma, on the border of Zaire, and I have seen the refugee camps there, and I've seen big halls with incredible a lot of bodies and older people, little children.
I know, it's painful.
But it's more than painful. It's something you cannot accept. At least I cannot accept. On the other hand, I feel powerless. Okay, I've written about it. That's my power. But
so when you're powerless to do anything about something, what do you do?
in this case, I've written about it. I've told people about what's.
But to write about it, what must you do first?
think.
And in the process of thinking, what happens? You come into some understanding. Be
Well-
it complete or be it partial. Doesn't matter. But you do have some level of understanding.
But how can you understand a war?
When you
Maybe you can understand it, but you cannot accept it.
when you understand the components of the war, and you understand what creates these components and what is allowing these components to function, the cause and the effect in their functioning, then it's not a question of really accepting. It's a question of having no alternative but to do whatever you can to help. And that is a form of acceptance. Because if you don't accept, you can't help. If you don't embrace, you can't love. You see? So the very fact that you make an effort to change something says that you have accepted the need for the change. To accept the need for the change, then you have to say that there's something that needs to be changed. And that is a form of acceptance of what has happened or what the problem may be. So it's a form of acceptance regardless to what you do.
Can you accept everything? Is there something you cannot accept?
When I understand, or if I first try to become more aware of the cause and the effect, there is nothing that cannot be accepted.
There is nothing you cannot accept.
Nothing.
I
Because
find it
it's-
so hard to understand.
Because it's not a question of a thing or a person or a reality being accepted. It doesn't need to be accepted. It is, without needing to be accepted. It didn't ask for our acceptance in order to exist.
Well, of course, it has to do with enlightenment and all these things, but it's so difficult for me
Of course.
to maybe it's not so easy, not so difficult to understand, because I can try to understand, but to accept, that's hard for me.
It's a
In these
process.
few minutes we're talking about these
It's
things.
a process. And the obstacle, this is why it becomes the opportunity. You become
Is-
a warrior.
Are you a warrior?
Of course.
But a warrior means a fighter.
Yes.
In what way you are a fighter?
Because I try and understand and I try and bring about change.
But on the other hand, you are speaking like someone you only can love. You are someone you have to embrace. I mean,
A warrior cannot be loved.
a warrior cannot be loved.
No, I'm asking you.
I think a warrior can be loved by his family, by his friends.
Wasn't
by,
Jesus Christ a warrior?
yeah, in a
Wasn't
sort of way.
Buddha a warrior?
Yeah, that's true.
Mahatma Gandhi was a warrior.
Yeah.
Huh? Martin Luther King was a warrior.
But what when Gaddafi or Mr. Bin Laden or all these people, what do you say to these people when they
Depends on
say
your
I'm a warrior?
perspective.
Sorry?
It depends on your perspective.
Because it's so easy to say.
If you were the British occupying India, you
Yeah.
would not have looked upon Mahatma Gandhi as being a lovable warrior.
Yeah,
So it depends on your perspective.
Yeah.
It depends on your stance.
yeah. But then back to my question I asked you earlier. Is there not an example that makes you sad, that makes you cry, that makes you angry?
Everything.
Are you a
Everything.
person who sometimes cry?
Of course. But I don't give the energy to the tears. I let the tears become my strength.
Yeah. But what is if I may ask you that? What was the last time and what was the last reason that you cried?
Just yesterday,
May I ask you because of what?
I saw a man on the street, didn't have money, and he was begging.
And then?
It made me sad. Inside I cried. Because I know that it wasn't his creation.
But what about this man? Because I also feel sadness, but I cannot let this sadness come over me every day.
Exactly. You cannot let
Oh,
it
that's-
control you.
Yeah,
Huh?
that's true. That's true. But why this man? Because in Los Angeles, in India,
He's
in
only an
Amsterdam,
example
It's just an example.
of the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Who was it said that when one person is suffering, we all suffer?
Well, this
Right there.
Chicken tandoori with a naan.
It's equivalent to the Western world's taxi.
How do you call this car?
Rickshaw. It's the auto rickshaw. This is a form of Kali. She's also known as Durga. She is the goddess, she is the mother, she is the giver of life, she is also the receiver or the taker of life. She is the sustenance of all physical existence, of all living beings. Mother Kali. In Africa, we know her as Oya. In Hawaii, she's known as Pele. And all over the world you'll find her. In Israel, she's known as Lalith. Even in Saudi Arabia, she's known as Alat. So like this, all over the world you'll find the equivalent of Kali. Mother Kali, the mother principle. The primary force that gives sustenance and meaning to all physical existence.
Hello, my name is Luc Sala, and we're in Amsterdam and we talk with Le Baaba. He is Maasai, but lives in America. And when I saw him first, I got this feeling, this memory of a song that says, I'm a legal alien, an Englishman in New York. You are not an Englishman, you are Maasai living in LA, but you must feel a little alien.
Not really alien, because my bloodline is Maasai, true enough, but my identity is with all indigenous people. Mostly Africa, but all over the planet I feel home. Because wherever there are people that are in touch with nature, or desiring to be more in touch with nature, then that is also my home.
Well, my home is Amsterdam, and that's where we're sitting, and you're watching the people here in the center of Amsterdam passing by. How does it compare to, say, Los Angeles, or for that matter, India?
The faces change, the language is different, but the city is the same.
Some people must react to you by staring and, hey, this is a strange image.
Yes, and this is only because they're not familiar with it or they don't understand it. So the opportunity is there to help them to understand, to help them to be more familiar, and therefore not to feel alien or to see me as an alien. And this is very beneficial for the human being, because this allows us to come together and realize that we are diverse and we are many different cultures and many different forms, many different ways of looking, but essentially we're just one family, we're parts of one family.
Now you travel around the world and you're interested in working with indigenous people, looking at their culture. Is there a common ground in all these different cultures?
There is. There's a common spiritual ground. And this is the understanding of our true nature, understanding of our true origin and our true destiny. The one reality is there. It may take many forms, it may take many paths, but it all has the same origin, ultimately speaking, and ultimately speaking it has the same destiny. And that is a union with our true being, which is one being with everything around us.
You have a center in Los Angeles where you use the word animism, which means that everything around us has spirit. For people in the West, or maybe people from the Jewish tradition or the Hindu tradition, that is not their normal belief system. They believe in one God, that's above us and takes care of us. How does that compare with animism?
Well, in any religion, if you go deep enough into its doctrine, you will find that its belief is based upon animation of the nature, and that the God, the one God, is omnipotent, omniprevalent, omniscient, omnipresent. For it to be an omnipresent, and that is an all-present reality, for it to be an all-knowing reality, for it to be an all-powerful reality, for it to be an all-dominant or present reality with presence in everything, permeating all things, then it cannot be in truth separate from anything. And so even in the Judaism, you have the one God, but the one God has the 10 attributes, which are called the Adam Kadman, which is referred to also by the tree of life. And so these 10 attributes are seen as the manifestations of the one, Yahweh or Adonai Elohim. This is all absorbed by the ultimate reality of Ein Sof. So this is Kabbalah and the mystic teachings of Judaism. In Islam, you have the same thing. In Islam, you have 99 attributes to Allah, and each of these are representing Allah as Allah. However, in the Holy Quran of Islam, it is said that if every pen was turned to, if every tree was turned to pen, and if every ocean was turned to ink, it would still not be enough to write the names of Allah. This is allured to in the Holy Quran and also spoken of in the Hadith. So, you find this in every religion. You find this in every philosophy. In Christianity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit is three. What does not have the presence of Spirit? What is not the process of the progeny of male and female? So if that Son is the manifestation of the Father through the Spirit, then who's not the Son? What's not the Son? Where is not the Son? Or the daughter? So like this, if we look into the esoteric, if we look into the metaphysical, if we look into the mystical teachings of even the most staunch religions on monoism, then you will find that the animism is not saying anything really different. It's just that we are able to, or willing to, see that the whole is part of the one, and the one is part of the whole. In philosophy, this is sometimes referred to as monotheism, the one, the theistic belief in oneness, polytheism, the many, and pantheism, the all as the one as the all. So the animism is actually all three. It's the monotheism, it's the polytheism, and the pantheism as one reality. Of course.
So if there is then a basis, what would Aldous Huxley call perennial wisdom in all these things, but the forms are so different. When I look at the New Guinea, the people that eat each other, the headhunters, versus the tradition that you come from, the Maasai, versus the people that live in America, they're all so very different. Why these different forms doing the same thing?
Everything in nature is different. You see, a lot of times we get into the false assumption that there is such thing as equality. There is no equality. Nothing is exactly the same as anything else. Everything in nature is diverse, of the same species, of the same character, of the same form, but it's different. Even you look at the tree. The tree has the one type of leaf, but each leaf is different. You look at the sand on the beach. Each grain of sand is uniquely shaped in its own characterization.
Yes, but some of these cultures do frighten us because they are so much different.
The fear of anything is only the result of our lack of knowledge. Ignorance creates fear. When we have an understanding, when we have a knowledge of what and why and how, then the fear dissipates. The fear is dissolved. If the fear is not dissolved, the ignorance becomes greater, and out of that fear and that ignorance, we have hostility. And this hostility is because the ego comes in place and says that because I and me and my are different from you, your and yours, then to survive, I have to suppress. I have to oppress you and yours in order to survive. This is the illusion. This is the false premise that greed and lust and ego and whole identity of cultures and nations have been based upon for over 6,000 years now. This is a problem. But the problem is based upon the ignorance, the illusionary reality that we perceive to be real.
In practical terms, do you think that teaching children at school about other cultures is more worthwhile than teaching them mathematics or working on the internet or computers?
I think the problem is that we separate education. I think for education to be complete, for education to be holistic, for education to be truly beneficial and profitable for life on this planet, that we need to quit making separation. We need to find a way to make it a holistic unification of understanding and of knowledge. And this means that we must see all as part of an equanimical principle of existence. Not equality, but equanimical. This is saying that it is balanced. It may not be the same. It may not need to be the same. Nor does it really ever need to be the same. But there is sameness. And so when we can see the sameness, when we can see a way of relating to someone who is different, something that is different, something that appears to be so different until we can't equate it being the same, then we get beyond the falsism of our separate way of thinking. And this is what education is ultimately in its best form to do. It can bring us together or it can separate us. It can bring us together or tear us apart, depending on how much it is willing to go beyond the restricts and the confines of its own limitations.
Now, as long as I remember, education was dogmatic. You know, I was brought up a Catholic and I lived in a society with certain beliefs. These days it's no longer called dogmatic, but politically correct. But it's stringent. I mean, you have to follow what your peers or your people around you say. Could we change that?
If we understand the nature and the very words by which we see things or understand things. Political correct is just simply saying correct according to that which is the accepted form of government. Politics is the science of governing people. So if it's correct, then we're saying it's correct because we have accepted that this particular format is the guideline for everyone, regardless to who or what or where or how it may be different or may be opposed. And this is dogma, and dogma is the problem. Doctrine is not the problem. Religion is not the problem. Science is not the problem. Philosophy is not the problem. Racial diversity is not the problem. Cultural diversity is not the problem. Diversity is necessary for unity. But the problem is dogmatism. It's the ism of dogma, which says that this is the only way and there is no other way. That type of thinking is based upon pure ignorance. And that ignorance is going to lead to the demise of life as we know it on this planet, unless we can change it.
Now, what surprised me in your attitude is that you said diversity is a necessity for unity. Let's take this to the level of two Maasai tribes fighting over cows or cattle. Maasai strike me as a rather proud, warrior-like people. They will fight about those cows, wouldn't they?
Conflict between tribal cultures or even intertribal conflict is not about greed or not about ownership per se. It's about the fertility of the life which is beneficial for the whole, which is most beneficial for the whole. In Western philosophy, you have something called survival of the fittest. And this is saying that the survival of the most fit is that which is most conducive for the survival of the whole. And so we live according to that, not intentionally, and not, in a way to where we try to cause pain or suffering or any way of trying to exercise ownership over anyone or anything. But it's about survival as a whole. And we are just subject to the science that governs, a universal science that governs that. That universal science is the science of sacrifice. Sacrifice is a universal principle. This is why
you would say that a war on the level that we would imagine the Maasai have on I don't know, cattle rights or whatever, is more of a ritual, a sacrificial thing than it is what we have, war because of greed, war because we don't want to understand each other.
This is exactly what it is. It's more of a sacrificial, more of a sacred, more of a altruistic, even a philanthropic cause, motive, purpose, and reason. You see, war is not in and of itself a bad thing. What makes war or conflict a bad thing is when it is ruled by selfishness and not selflessness. When it is ruled by I and me and my consciousness versus you and yours consciousness, which is seen to be totally opposite, which is seen to be totally, absolutely separate. This is the problem. This is the problem. War is a struggle. Life is a struggle.
War is sometimes a struggle where I or one faction tries to impose its sense of reality on others,
well, that's what
including our sense of peace.
Yes, this is where the dogma comes in. This is where the ego, the false ego, the lower ego, the sense of arrogance, the sense of greed, the sense of lust, the sense of overpowering and empowering comes into play. And so this is a sense of ignorance. This is a sense of wrong motive, purpose, and reason, which is based upon only my ego, only someone else's ego. So if I or anyone else act in a warlike manner with that type of consciousness, then that becomes ill-productive and counterproductive to life itself. And any action that goes untended has its reaction. Even if it's tended, it has its reaction. But the difference is that one is reciprocal and the other is not.
Is present day of warfare, where we see President Clinton who decides to wipe out some camps in Pakistan or in Africa, is that an acceptable way of warfare?
No, because the basis of that is greed. The basis of that is false perception.
Have there been just wars then?
There have been, but not in the sense of what we call world wars or what we have come to know in modern terms as the conflicts between nations. No, we see warfare all the time in nature. You see the battle of the seasons. You see the battle of the sun with the moon. You see the conflict between interests in everything in nature. But it's not for a personal selfish reason. It's for the benefit of the whole and the benefit of the function of nature, which sustains the whole. There's a difference.
In the old Vedas, in the old Indian tradition, one of the main books, the Bhagavad Gita, talks about a war, a just war between, in fact, families that has to be fought, cannot be escaped. But that's old history. Do we face situations like that today?
The basis of life is based upon this old history, because there's always going to be the negative and the positive force. There's always going to be the light and the dark force, and neither can cancel out the other, or neither will exist. So whenever the whole is threatened by a part of the whole, then the war is declared upon the part so that the whole can survive. This is just a basic principle in universal law. The universe is governed by two principles, law and order. We are all subject to the law that governs our very existence. When or if we go against that law or act in contrary to that law, then we are naturally annihilated by the order, which is the universal order that lies underneath all laws and all principles. This is just a natural, thing that happens, and I don't think that we can see any contradiction to that in a negative sense when we look at nature or when we look at indigenous people. However, nature and indigenous people now are more subject to so-called first world powers and first world influence, where greed and ignorance and dogma are coming into play. So this is a problem. This is a problem. India is a very special place. India is probably the most spiritual place remaining in the world. It's a dichotomy. It's a paradox, because while it is for sure the most spiritual place, it also is the most controversial, dealing with poverty, dealing with all of the great hostilities that the poverty will give and bring to life. But because of that, it makes the people very strong. Their weakness becomes their strength. Their fear becomes their courage. And more than any place that I have been on the planet, this is true in India. India is also the most ancient of all existing cultures that are maintaining their original or their very primitive way of living and understanding life. And for that, India is very special. India is very special for that reason. The street life is very beautiful. The street life is very humble, and in many ways it reminds you of other third world countries. But India is different in the sense that it doesn't really change. It goes from one village to the next, from one city to the next, and it's the same. Even with the intervention of modern technology, India still maintains its very ancient ways of living a very humble, what even might be called a very meager existence. But again, in that humble state, in that meager state, there's a great strength, there's a great camaraderie, there's a great sense of connection, not only with each other but with everything around them, the animal life, the vegetation, the environment. Everything is considered in their daily life, and this makes it again very special, very special.
At a slightly different location, Oibibio in the center of Amsterdam, we go on talking with Baaba. Baaba, one of the things people will, of course, say when they see you, you look a little bit strange to us. Why do you look like this?
Well, as I said before, my bloodline is Maasai, so I carry the physical characteristics of being Maasai. But as people who are familiar with Maasai, or even Maasai themselves that may see this, they will recognize right away that there are things that are not traditionally Maasai, such as lip plate, such as nose ring, such as facial tattooing. And so these things are part of other indigenous people, tribes in Africa, as well as different parts of the world, Papua New Guinea, Irian Jaya, Borneo, South America, Amazon rainforest, like this. So these things are artifacts and represent the spiritual connection to the ancestor, earth, fire, water, and air. So because my commitment My spiritual purpose is not to just represent one tribe or my own bloodline, but to help people to be more aware of the importance and the significance and the value of all indigenous people, all tribal people, all people that are threatened, that live in the remote areas of the world. So for that reason, in my travels, I have been willing to adapt and adopt some of the ways in which they have spiritually understood the changing of their body to better be a catalyst for the ancestral spirit. This is what it is. It's a better catalyst for the ancestral spirit. It's like an antenna for radio that gets better wave reception.
Receptors, but there's patterns there. There must be other ritual meanings than just being an art piece.
Of course there's more than art, because it has a spiritual significance which deals with the ancestral presence. It deals with our connection with the ecology and with the environment around us and with other human beings.
There's also the aspect of self-inflicted pain. Is it? I mean, it's not so easy to walk around with these things.
Well, life is pain. You know, for us, we don't see life in the same paradigm as the Western person might see it, because for us, the pain and the pleasure are parallels of the same reality. So the pain, when it has the motive, purpose, and reason of raising consciousness or expanding one's awareness or one's connection with the environment or with others around them, then the pain is the sacrifice, and that sacrifice is a very, very honorable and almost a pleasurable experience. It's like a woman giving childbirth. You know, she goes through 9 months of difficulty, and she goes finally through the labor and through the childbirth. And sure, it is painful, sure it is stressful, sure it is not always easy. Sometimes it's very difficult. But the reward, the dividend, the end result is worth it, and even not compared to be worth or without worth. It's just the way we live, it's the way we are.
There's now a new fashionable thing. People pierce themselves. We have earrings, rings all over the place. That's a new Western thing. How does it relate to your, well, I couldn't call them piercings, but to your body adornments?
They're piercings. It relates in not a conscious manner always, because many people have adopted these things as fashion, and it has become a trend. And people are doing this for the most part unconscious of its significance, unconscious of what effects it has upon the body, what effects it has upon the psyche, what effects it has upon their life and the environment around them. But this is not a bad thing. This is just another example of the great power of the ancestral spirit, which in a time of disunity, in a time of disharmony, in a time of disassociation, our youth are showing us the necessity of connection. And so subconsciously they are doing these things guided by a spiritual presence, guided by an ancestral spirit. And they don't even know that this is guiding them, but it is happening, because when you see these people piercing, and then you go to cultures and you see that the same piercing is being done, there's a connection there. It may not be conscious, as I said, but it is there. And so eventually, because of the familiarity of that which seems so odd or strange or unusual becoming a part of our everyday experience, then we won't see each other as alien or as that much separate or different from one another. And so this is a positive thing. This is a very positive thing.
Something about Calcutta. What did you do in Calcutta, Baaba?
Calcutta is an interesting place. The word Calcutta is the result of a British mispronunciation of Kalighat. Kalighat is a Sanskrit which means the heart of Kali, heart of Mother Kali. India, in all of its variations of poverty and variations of the same culture, Calcutta represents the epitome. Calcutta represents the ultimate expression of what India was about, is, and probably will always be about.
So what did you do in Calcutta?
In Calcutta, there I was studying for a few months there, and in periods of years I was going and returning to that place, because that is where my spiritual affinity is. That's where one of my greatest spiritual teachings have come. And so there is a study. There is a study of not only life, but of my own being. Because India forces you to look within. It forces you to find the motive, the purpose, and the reason for your being, for your existence. Calcutta is the ultimate opportunity for that.
Can you talk about Kali a little bit more?
Kali is the female aspect of God that is the literal personification of death. In Hinduism, there's no real belief in duality. Reality is seen to be one principle. And Mother Kali, the word Kali again, Sanskrit, is speaking of time beyond time, existence which goes beyond the limitations, the qualifications, or the conditions of existence. It is that which is the absolute aspect of being, not as a being, but in a state of being. This is Kali. Kali is the mother. Kali is the universal feminine force that gives all sustenance to all things. It is that from which we have come to that which we must also return. This is Mother Kali. Her color is black. Her being is wrathful. And in that is the epitome of love. This gives you the feeling of India in the temple. This is the scrotum, or the chanting, the Sanskrit chanting, which is the prayer, which is calling upon the many aspects of God. In India, there are over 333,000 forms of God. And those 333,000 has their consort, or their feminine aspect, which is another 333,000. From that, you get a progeny, which makes another 333,000. So you end up with over 999,000 aspects of the one principle, which we know as God. Beautiful exhibit. This is the Shiva Lingam. This is called the Shiva Lingam. This represents the universal creative force, which is a male energy, which is in the middle of the female energy. The vaginal cavity is represented as a yoni, the Sanskrit word for that, which represents the creative energy existing within the abstract space of life, the abstract space of existence, the abstract form which is formless. Lingayat. It's a very old image here. All over the world, you'll find examples of the indigenous culture that has very, very strong similarities to one another. Not only India and Africa, but also in Indonesia, in Papua New Guinea, Irian Jaya, some of the places in the world where indigenous people are still maintaining their primitive culture. Primitive meaning primal, primitive meaning first. This is a misunderstood word, because people are thinking that primitive is something that says backwards or undeveloped. No, Primitive means primal or first. So we are proud to be called primitive. Some of the most primitive cultures that are still being maintained in their primal state are in Papua New Guinea and in Irian Jaya. So this part of the museum that we're in right now is showing us some of the artifacts from Papua New Guinea. For example, these are some of the weapons that are used by the tribesmen there. And these are all taken from the earth and made from different parts of the animal, the tusk, the bone, the tooth, things like that. And so this is very similar to what is being done all over Africa. West Africa, East Africa, Central Africa. The Papua New Guinea people are directly descended from the Congo region of Africa. This is Central Africa, also called Zaire. In Papua New Guinea, one of the most important aspects of life there is the sources that sustain the fertility of the land and the way of living, which is the rivers and the many waterways. The waterways and the animals and the life that lives near these waterways are considered the ancestral spirit. So for that reason, great respect and great adoration is given to these energies and to these spiritual beings. And so as we see here, these boats are carved in remnants of that spiritual entity and that spiritual presence, which gives praise and gives respect to all of the various forms of the ancestral spirit. Some of them human, some of them animal, some of them part human, part animal. This is all a way of expressing what is known as animism. Animism being the belief and the understanding that all existence, all things live, and in their living are that which gives sustenance to our being. Papua New Guinea is probably one of the most preserved aspects of this animistic belief, even more than India. Many times the ancestral spirits are so strong until the images are made to carry that strength throughout the village and to carry that strength throughout the whole community so that other villages can understand. And so this is done in the form of masks and done in the form of carvings. And so here we see an example of that. Here we see a very intricate and a very symbolic form of the ancestral worship of the animistic beliefs, which becomes totemism. Not only animism, but totemism. Animism